Employers. When did a revenge resignation bring down the entire department? Story 1. I was the assistant manager at a medium-sized marketing agency. My direct manager, Phil, was an insecure micromanager who loved to take credit and pass blame. I handled most of the client presentations, vendor coordination, and junior staff training. Phil mostly hovered. When he publicly berated me for a scheduling error he made, yelled at me in front of the CEO, I decided I was done. But I didn't just walk out. I spent 2 weeks compiling a handover document that looked perfect on the surface but was subtly sabotaged. Client file names were swapped, login credentials were 1 character off. Timelines were real but intentionally misaligned. Nothing major, just enough to cause domino effects. And because Phil insisted I CC him on everything but rarely read, I made sure he approved every step. I submitted my resignation with 2 days' notice. On my last day, I acted normal, cheerful even. 2 weeks later, 3 clients walked away due to incompetence. The junior staff were lost in the chaos. Phil, who didn't know how to do the actual work, panicked and tried to blame me until they pulled the emails and saw he'd approved it all. Within a month, the entire department was dissolved. Phil was demoted, then quietly let go. The kicker? The CEO offered me a freelance consulting gig afterward. I declined. Story 2. Our department's MVP was a guy named Trevor. He didn't say much, but he was the only one who understood the legacy database our system relied on. IT kept saying it needed upgrading, but the execs didn't want to spend the money. So Trevor kept it alive with duct tape and genius. One day, Trevor asked for a raise. Modest one. HR rejected it. So did the department head. Not in the budget, they said. Trevor nodded. 2 weeks later, he quit with a simple email. Effective immediately. The next Monday, no one could access the database. Passwords failed. Then came the real horror. Trevor had written the system's entire command structure in custom shell scripts, and he hadn't documented any of it. Worse, he'd deleted the backup scripts he maintained personally. The company's official backups were 3 months old and corrupt. We spent 6 figures bringing in outside experts. Projects froze. Clients canceled. Eventually, our department was split, then absorbed. Managers got axed. HR tried to sue Trevor, but turns out none of what he did was against policy. Last I heard, he was consulting for a competitor, making double. Story 3. I worked in a warehouse logistics firm where my friend Angela was the shift lead. She handled scheduling, inventory systems, even HR disputes, because the actual managers were too lazy. They treated her like trash, forced overtime, ignored harassment complaints. So she did the unthinkable, applied for jobs for all of us. She organized meetings, mock interviews, and group applications during off hours. Most of us thought it was just venting. One Thursday, 9 of us submitted resignation letters together. Angela said, "Since I already run this place, I figured I'd show you how fast I can stop it too." Within 2 weeks, operations ground to a halt. Orders were delayed. A client filed breach of contract. The managers were scrambling to hire temps, but Angela had been so efficient they didn't even know where half the spreadsheets lived. They offered to rehire her at triple the pay. She laughed and walked out. Story 4. My boss used to call me the glue. I managed the client pipeline, drafted contracts, and trained every new hire. Yet, when I asked to be included in strategic meetings, he told me I wasn't big picture enough. So when I got an offer elsewhere, I accepted silently and scheduled my resignation email for 10 minutes before the biggest quarterly pitch. What I didn't include in that email? The pitch deck, the login to the client portal, the follow-up materials, all of which I usually handled alone. They fumbled through the meeting. Client ghosted them within a day. My boss tried to scramble a damage control presentation the next week, but I'd already locked down the CRM and removed my shared folder access. A week after I left, 3 more team members followed. The department head had to step in, but the morale was already poisoned. The team dissolved within 2 months. I saw a job post for my old role recently. It listed 6 responsibilities. I had been doing all of them. Story 5. It was a call center, low pay, high stress, and tighter surveillance than a prison yard. But we had one secret weapon, Marcus, our scheduling analyst. He was the only one who could make the workforce software do what we needed, patching call queues, syncing breaks, avoiding overlaps. Upper management thought the tool ran automatically. One day, the director blamed Marcus for a missed KPI and publicly humiliated him in a meeting, said he was lucky to have a job. Marcus quit, quietly, didn't even finish his shift. The next Monday, chaos. Calls were routed wrong. No agents during peak hours, staff had double lunch breaks, one guy worked 14 hours because his end shift never logged. We discovered Marcus hadn't just left, he'd also removed the auto-sync script that kept the system from eating itself. No one knew how to fix it. 3 supervisors quit within a week. The director was reassigned. Eventually, corporate outsourced the entire department overseas. Marcus now works remote, 3 hours a day, for twice the pay. Story 6. I was the team lead at a boutique animation studio. Small, fast-paced, high client expectations. My job included managing junior animators, reviewing storyboards, and mediating between clients and the creative director, who was, let's say, emotionally unstable. The director constantly berated people. He'd throw tantrums over pixel placements. One day, after 12 straight hours of revision, I asked for a comp day off. His response, "You're not valuable enough to slow this place down," so I resigned. But not before I did something quiet but devastating. I told the juniors the truth. They were severely underpaid and overperforming, and I helped them calculate what their work was worth. Then I introduced them to a recruiter I knew. Within 3 weeks of my resignation, 7 animators left. Deadlines collapsed, clients pulled projects. The director tried to hire freelancers, but they didn't understand the studio's custom pipeline. He offered me double to return. I said, I wasn't valuable enough, remember? The studio shuttered 2 months later. Story 7. I worked in finance. Our department managed client portfolios worth millions, but we were chronically understaffed. I handled client reports, fund rebalancing, and internal audits for everyone because the department head's son had been gifted a high-salaried analyst job and did nothing. When I pointed it out, I got a warning for disrespectful tone. So I crafted a revenge exit. I didn't sabotage, I just stopped covering for the others. I stopped reminding them of deadlines. I didn't double-check their errors. I simply did only what I was assigned. Then I left, giving a 4-day notice. The first quarterly report post my exit was riddled with errors, typos in numbers, formulas misapplied, reports sent to wrong clients. The head tried to blame me, but audit logs showed his son had been approving the final reports. 4 clients left. Internal compliance opened an investigation. The department was overhauled, and both the head and his son were terminated. Sometimes karma just needs a calculator. Story 8. I was a senior software engineer at a tech startup, where the CEO treated engineers like interns and worshipped the sales team. The sales team constantly overpromised features we hadn't even started building. Guess who had to stay up late coding emergency patches? When I requested they stop committing to 2-week timelines for 2-month builds, the CEO told me, "We're a startup. If you can't handle pressure, maybe you're not startup material." So I resigned, but not before doing one last thing. I documented all the back-end tech debt, outlined every upcoming failure point, and blind copied the board of directors. The kicker? I attached a screenshot of the sales team's false client promises, along with timestamps and internal Slack messages, showing the CEO saying, "We'll just make the devs figure it out." A month after I left, the board replaced him. The startup still exists, but now the engineers run it. Story 9. We were a non-profit, underpaid and overworked, but passionate. My colleague, Jenna, ran the donor management system, tracking thousands of recurring donations, writing thank you letters, sending receipts, managing tax documentation. Without her, we'd sink. Our executive director took her for granted, said, "We can't give raises this year after spending $12,000 on a donor golf event." So Jenna quit. But first, she set her final donation export to auto-send 1 week after her last day, to every major donor, with uncensored internal notes. Those notes, brutal truths, stuff like, "Mr. Phillips gives $10K but expects constant ass-kissing. Do not invite Ms. Green again, drunk at last fundraiser. Ask for more money after his divorce is finalized." It blew up. Half our donors pulled funding. Local media picked up the story. The board forced the director to resign. Jenna now works for a different nonprofit, with a 40% raise. Story 10. I was a project coordinator at a large construction firm. Our job sites ran like clockwork only because I did the impossible, convinced union teams, subcontractors, and architects to stay on schedule despite constant mismanagement from above. After my 5th year without a raise and getting yelled at for a delay that engineering caused, I decided to quit. Before leaving, I scheduled a meeting with every site foreman and walked them through the real timelines upper management had been hiding. The result? Foreman refused to start 3 major projects until the plans were redrawn. Site crews stopped showing up. The company missed 2 city deadlines. They tried to pin it on me, but I'd copied every email and CC'd the department's legal counsel. 3 lawsuits were filed against the firm for breach of contract. The executive team was forced to resign. Last I heard, they hired 2 people to do what I used to handle alone. They're still behind schedule. Story 11. I worked in university admissions, an understaffed nightmare. We were processing thousands of applications manually with outdated software. But we had Maya, a spreadsheet wizard who built color-coded systems, macros, and tagging methods no one else could replicate. When a new dean came in, he brought in his people and started sidelining Maya. One day, he accidentally copied her on an email saying, "She's past her prime and resistant to change. Let's give her a reason to quit." So she did. 2 weeks later, right before decision letters went out, her replacement thought she could just figure it out. She couldn't. Acceptances went to rejected applicants and vice versa. Parents were furious. One kid posted a TikTok of his rejection letter next to a full-ride scholarship email sent an hour later. It went viral. The university was trending, for all the wrong reasons. The dean resigned to pursue other opportunities. Maya rehired as a consultant at triple the pay. Story 12. I was in restaurant management. Our head chef, Andre, was a perfectionist. He trained every line cook, designed the seasonal menus, and could spot a spoiled mushroom from across the kitchen. Customers came because of him. The owners never acknowledged this. One day they hired a celebrity chef for marketing clout and told Andre to assist him. Andre calmly handed over his apron, said, "Let's see what your celebrity can do," and walked out. That night, the celebrity chef served frozen risotto, overcooked duck, and raw lamb. By week's end, 5 staff members quit. Reviews tanked. One food blogger called it the fall of Rome, if Rome had truffle fries. The restaurant shut down within 2 months. I heard Andre opened a private dining studio. Fully booked, 3-month wait list. Story 13. In a corporate HR department, Danielle was the policy whisperer. She wrote the handbooks, tracked legal compliance, and was the only person who knew which managers had open investigations. She'd raised alarms for months about a VP who was retaliating against whistleblowers, but execs told her to let legal handle it. So she resigned, quietly. But before leaving, she submitted an official public records request to the Department of Labor for herself, listing all the incidents she'd documented, and CC'd it to the company. Turns out she'd kept everything: dates, names, emails, and under whistleblower protection laws, her leaving didn't stop the feds from acting. The investigation shut down the entire HR department. 3 executives were terminated. The company settled quietly, but not before Danielle's LinkedIn post, "This is why HR matters," went viral in the industry. She's now head of compliance at a Fortune 100 firm. Story 14. I was a visual merchandiser at a retail chain. My displays brought in huge walk-in traffic, especially during seasonal events. My boss took credit constantly, told Regional I was good at lifting things, while he strategized, so I resigned. But not before my last masterpiece, Valentine's Day window. I made a massive, beautiful display. Hearts, lights, mannequins mid-dance. It stopped people in their tracks. But inside the display, tiny letter tiles, over 100 of them, spelling out one long looping sentence across the props and product tags. This company treats staff like decorations, pretty, disposable, and unpaid. It took them 3 days to notice. Customers had already taken photos and shared them online. The store was featured on BuzzFeed under Best Employee Revenge Ever. Regional came down hard. My boss was demoted. Sales never recovered. I freelance now. Sometimes I still hide messages in my work. Story 15. I was a compliance officer at a government contractor. My job was to ensure that procurement, hiring, and data handling met strict federal guidelines. I flagged several shady deals, but my director told me, just check the boxes and stop slowing things down. So I quietly documented everything. When I resigned, I didn't blow the whistle directly. I just submitted one final report labeled Pending Items and dropped it in the shared drive. It was 182 pages long, with hyperlinks. Auditors found it 3 weeks later while prepping for a renewal review. The report revealed everything: misallocated funds, nepotism in hiring, and data leaks. Our contract was suspended. 3 departments were frozen. One exec tried to claim it was a malicious former employee, but my documentation was airtight and time-stamped by their own servers. A congressional review followed. The company dissolved one of its largest divisions. I now work in federal oversight, and I sleep great. Story 16. I worked for a small but powerful lobbying firm in D.C. My job? Build relationships with congressional staffers and quietly push legislative language through draft bills. It's not glamorous. It's chess, not checkers. The problem was our director of operations, a smug Ivy League guy who thought I was just charm and coffee. When I closed the biggest deal of the year, he told me, next time, loop me in earlier. I don't like being blindsided by your wins. So I handed in my resignation with a 2-week notice. But I also did something subtle. I contacted every congressional contact I'd built over the years and gave them one message: going independent. If you ever need the real work done, you know how to reach me. Within a month, 5 clients dropped our firm and signed with me privately. The firm imploded. They had no real relationships, just spreadsheets and overpriced lunches. That director now works for a PR agency. Last I checked, their website still listed me under notable alumni. Story 17. I was a nurse supervisor at a private elder care facility. My unit had 30 residents, 15 staff, and 1 administrator who cared more about Yelp reviews than actual care. After months of asking for better staffing ratios, I lost a patient, an avoidable death. I gave notice, but not before calling a meeting with every nurse, aide, and janitor on night shift. We walked out together at 7:01 a.m. That morning, 30 residents had no scheduled meds, no breakfast, no transport. Families were furious. State inspectors were already circling because of complaints I'd submitted anonymously. By noon, the administrator called it a coordinated betrayal. By week's end, the facility was under state investigation. Within a month, its license was suspended. Several of us now work at a new facility run by a nonprofit, founded by one of the former residents' daughters. Story 18. I worked in automotive manufacturing, specifically in quality assurance. Every car door, hood, and wheel passed my team before shipping. I discovered a batch of faulty parts coming from an overseas supplier, flagged it, and told upper management we needed to halt production. Instead, they demoted me. "You're exaggerating," the VP said. So I walked out midweek, no drama. But I also sent an anonymous tip to the National Safety Board with full documentation, including serial numbers and timestamps. A month later, the manufacturer was hit with a recall. 40,000 vehicles pulled back. The VP was fired. The entire QA department was gutted and restructured. I now work for the safety board. Sometimes you have to crash the car to prove the brakes don't work. Story 19. At a SaaS startup, I was head of customer success. My small team managed every post-sale touchpoint, from onboarding to troubleshooting. Clients loved us. The founder didn't. He wanted faster churn to hit quarterly upsell metrics, even if it meant lying to clients. I refused. He said, "You're replaceable." So I left. But before I did, I had one final meeting with every major client. I didn't badmouth the company. I just told them the truth. I was leaving, and they should document everything going forward because I couldn't vouch for support anymore. They left in droves. 6 enterprise contracts evaporated in 2 weeks. Revenue dropped 40%. The founder fired the sales VP, then tried to rehire me. Too late. I'd already joined one of our ex-clients as their new vice president of customer success. Story 20. I was an internal IT manager at a medium-sized law firm. We were paper thin on cybersecurity. I sent warnings for months. No MFA, no VPN, weak passwords. No one cared. Then the managing partner's son asked me to install a crypto miner on a server. No one will know, he said. That was it. I gave notice. But I also backed up everything, then deleted my documentation from the internal wiki and removed admin privileges I had created for convenience. I didn't sabotage. I just removed the duct tape I had applied over the years. 3 weeks after I left, they were hit with a ransomware attack. Systems frozen. Case files gone. They paid the ransom. When I got a panicked email from one of the partners, I simply replied, "I no longer work there. Please contact IT." They outsourced the entire department. 2 lawyers left. The managing partner retired early. I freelance now, with strict red lines. Crypto bros aren't worth it. Story 21. I was a curriculum coordinator at a private school that branded itself as progressive. Truth was, they just overworked their staff and underpaid us while using buzzwords in their brochure. My boss constantly took credit for my programs. When the state board praised a new hybrid learning system I built, she smiled and said, "We're so proud of my initiative." I handed in my resignation on a Friday. But before I left, I used our cloud system to revoke access to every curriculum document I'd authored, totally legal as they were tied to my licensed account. I even labeled each locked folder. "Please contact my name for licensing." That Monday, they had a surprise inspection. No access to materials, no proof of compliance, no way to run their programs. They failed the audit. Accreditation was suspended. Last I heard, they were forced to refund tuition. I'm now with a public school district, less glossy, but way more ethical. Story 22. I was the operations manager at a family-run bakery chain. Sounds sweet, right? Nope, nepotism ran deep. I made schedules, ran vendor orders, and trained staff, but the owner's daughter showed up late, insulted workers, and pocketed cash for marketing. When I caught her stealing from the till, I reported it to her father. His response? "She's family, let it go." So I gave notice, but not before calling every supplier and letting them know I was leaving, because I was the only person who ever paid the bills on time. The moment I was out, deliveries stopped. By the following week, stores ran out of flour, sugar, and eggs. Customers complained, employees quit. The family business had to close 3 locations in a month. I opened my own bakery 6 blocks away. People followed the croissants. Story 23. I worked as a dispatcher for a fleet of emergency road service trucks. My job was high stakes: coordinate calls, assign drivers, manage weather delays, and update routes in real time. But my supervisor? He was a bully. Constantly screamed, called mistakes female problems, and once said, "You're too emotional for logistics." So I resigned, but I did it on a holiday weekend. The busiest time of the year. I gave 48 hours notice and watched the panic rise behind his smug face. I didn't sabotage anything. I just printed my personal route notes, highlighted everything I used daily that no one else understood, and put it in a sealed envelope labeled, "For someone who respects dispatchers." Nobody opened it. They tried to wing it. Over 60 calls went unanswered. A news segment ran showing a stranded family with a toddler in 104-degree heat. The supervisor was demoted. 2 drivers left. The department was overhauled. And the dispatcher job now pays 30% more. Story 24. At a mid-size architecture firm, I was the only one who knew how to operate our custom BIM building information modeling environment. I was hired fresh out of grad school and built most of the templates myself. The partners loved showing off our cutting-edge system during client pitches, but they didn't like giving me credit or raises. After my 3rd denied promotion, I resigned. Politely, quietly. But before leaving, I archived all my notes in a local-only folder and turned off the auto-sync to the cloud. Everything still looked intact, until they tried to edit anything. Files wouldn't open, templates glitched, rendering failed. They assumed it was a software bug. But they'd never asked how it was built. The new hire didn't know where to start. They lost 2 government contracts due to missed deadlines. 2 months later, they called asking for a quick consulting favor. I quoted them my new rate. They never called back. Story 25. I was an events coordinator at a luxury hotel. Weddings, corporate retreats, VIP parties. I handled them all. My boss liked to pop in last minute and take credit. Worst was during a celebrity wedding, where she told a reporter she handled all the logistics. After that stunt, I resigned. But not before scheduling a year's worth of automated follow-up emails to every major client I'd worked with from my personal Gmail. Each message was kind, helpful, and ended with, "Just a heads up, I no longer work there. If anything goes wrong, I won't be able to help." Things did go wrong. One wedding had a double-booked ballroom. A tech company found no AV setup. A politician's retreat had no gluten-free meals for his staff. Despite dietary restrictions noted clearly in my files, the hotel's online reviews tanked, management reshuffled. My old boss was moved to internal guest relations. I now run a private events firm. Guess who applied to work for me? Didn't even open the resume. Story 26. I worked as the head technician at a rural radio station. Small team, huge coverage area. Our broadcasting hardware was decades old, and only I knew how to maintain it. I documented everything, but the files were on a local drive, and no one ever bothered to learn. Then a corporate acquisition happened. They replaced the station manager with a 28-year-old from a podcast startup who said I was just the wrench guy. He cut my hours and brought in digital interns to automate everything. So I gave a week's notice. The night before I left, I took down the main transmitter for scheduled maintenance, a routine reboot that required 2 authentication keys. I left one behind and took the second, per protocol, to deliver in person to the replacement tech. No one showed up to collect it. The station went dark for 4 days. FCC fines, lost ad revenue. The interns couldn't even log in. The parent company fired the manager. When they tried to reach me, I said, "That's outside my support hours." Now I maintain equipment at a national broadcast network with union protections. Story 27. I was the buyer for a high-end fashion boutique chain. That meant I traveled, negotiated with designers, forecasted trends, and secured exclusivity deals. The job was stressful, but I was good at it. Then a new CEO took over, an ex-fintech bro who didn't know cotton from rayon. He told me fashion was just vibes and tried replacing my role with AI trend reports. So I handed in my notice, but not before canceling every pending vendor contract with full legal compliance, as I was the sole signatory on all POs. Then I sent each designer a note. "You are free to renegotiate new terms with whoever takes over. Thank you for your partnership." Most designers pulled out completely. No exclusivity, no stock. The stores rolled into spring with empty racks and last season's markdowns. 3 locations closed by summer. I started my own curated brand. One of my first vendors messaged, "Glad you're back. We hated working with bots." Story 28. I worked for a city council as the head of urban planning. My job was a weird mix of public policy, budgeting, zoning, and managing tense town halls. I built strong community relationships, especially with neighborhood leaders. After 6 years, a new city manager came in. Young, arrogant, and dismissive. He told me, "Public outreach is obsolete," and said we'd move to a data-driven model. Translation, screw the locals. So I resigned, but on the way out, I sent every active neighborhood association a copy of the upcoming development maps, with all the zoning variances marked in red. 3 days later, protests started. Council meetings were packed. Local media jumped in. The city manager stammered through interviews. Lawsuits were threatened. All because I gave the public what they were supposed to already have. The mayor stepped in. The manager was reassigned. I now consult for other cities, teaching them how to actually listen. Story 29. I worked in a mid-tier marketing agency specializing in political campaigns. My department handled digital strategy, ads, email blasts, and social media. I knew the software, targeting tools, and analytics inside out. But the agency head was corrupt. He quietly sold data to third-party groups, breaking multiple campaign laws. When I raised concerns, he said, "It's how the game's played. Grow up." So I left, but not before exporting every shred of metadata tied to our client ad spending. I didn't leak it. I just filed a detailed compliance report with timestamps to the FEC, Federal Election Commission, using a protected whistleblower channel. A month later, the agency was subpoenaed. Clients pulled funding, PR disaster. The digital department was dissolved entirely. I wasn't mentioned publicly, but insiders knew. Now I work for a watchdog nonprofit. I build firewalls instead of loopholes. Story 30. I was the facilities coordinator for a major museum. That meant lighting design, HVAC control, humidity monitoring, artifact movement, the unsexy stuff that keeps priceless history from decaying. A new director came in, slashed costs, and outsourced everything to a third-party contractor with zero museum experience. I gave 2 weeks' notice. But first, I documented the upcoming climate fluctuations and exactly how the new contractors had miscalibrated settings. Then I left that file, time-stamped and notarized with the preservation team. Within a month, 2 textile exhibits showed visible damage due to poor humidity control. The museum had to close off 4 halls. Insurance investigation ensued. Turns out, cutting corners with 17th century paintings isn't so smart. The director resigned under pressure. The preservation team reached out to thank me. I didn't reply. I was too busy helping open a rival private gallery across town. Story 31. I worked at a regional courier company as the logistics analyst. I designed the routes that made next-day delivery possible, accounting for traffic patterns, loading zones, and fuel costs. It was complex, but I'd built it from scratch in Excel and Python. When corporate hired a national efficiency expert, he claimed our whole setup was outdated. He said AI could do it all and offered me a demotion to fleet assistant. So I took PTO, packed up my files, and sent in a resignation letter effective immediately. The system they deployed was built from a prepackaged algorithm that didn't account for one crucial local factor: bridges that couldn't handle heavy vans. By the end of week 1, 2 trucks were stuck on back roads, and 1 driver took out a low-clearance bridge. Insurance claims, local news coverage, dozens of missed deliveries. Drivers revolted. I now work for a competitor who bought out our contract with the biggest pharmacy chain. Somewhere, that expert is probably still staring at a spreadsheet, wondering what went wrong. Story 32. I was an interpreter coordinator at a hospital serving a large immigrant community. I spoke 5 languages and scheduled all appointments involving non-English speakers, from ER trauma to maternity. The new admin director called my role non-essential. Said Google Translate was good enough. When I tried to explain how cultural context affects care, she rolled her eyes. So I quietly trained 2 of my best freelancers to apply elsewhere, packed my files, and quit. 3 days after I left, a pregnant woman misunderstood a medication change. The nurse had typed "reduced dosage" into a phone app. The patient stopped taking it completely. Emergency C-section, media coverage, legal threats. Suddenly, interpretation was a priority again. Too late. 3 interpreters had already left. Patients started transferring to another hospital where I now work. We take language seriously. Story 33. I worked for an e-learning company that developed training for government agencies. My role was voiceover director. I managed casting, pacing, editing, and QA across all modules. The CEO decided to replace all narration with AI to cut costs. I warned him, tone, pronunciation, and legal disclaimers can't be left to software. He said, "Humans are expensive. You're sentimental," so I resigned. But before I left, I sent a polite farewell to our biggest client, with a sample of their next training module. The AI voice had mispronounced "do not resuscitate" as "do resuscitate." No context filter, no human check. The client freaked, paused the contract. The CEO scrambled to blame interns, but QA logs had my name on everything prior to that handoff. The company's credibility collapsed. Multiple agencies cut ties. Now I run my own VO agency. We use humans and get things right the first time. Story 34. I was head of social media for a beverage brand that targeted young professionals. Think high-end energy drinks with words like synergy and focus on the can. I built their online presence from 0 to 300,000 followers in a year. Then they hired a CMO who said my content was too authentic and not data optimized. He started rejecting ideas, demanding bland corporate posts, and told me my work wasn't strategic. So I left, but not before scheduling one final post across all platforms. It read, "We believe in clean energy, clean minds, and clean breaks." This is my last post here. It's been real. People loved it, thought it was a stunt. Engagement spiked 600%. The CMO panicked, tried to recapture the momentum with a follow-up campaign full of buzzwords. It flopped. Followers mocked it. Sales dipped. 2 months later, they scrubbed the account and rebranded. My pinned tweet now says, "Be real or be replaced." Story 35. I was the lead copy editor at a publishing house known for fast turnaround self-help books and business memoirs. I managed a team of freelancers, wrote style guides, and caught everything from libel to basic grammar fails. The COO brought in a new software tool to eliminate human error and said I'd be transitioned into a consultant role. So I packed up and let the tool run. The very first book released post-me, a best-selling CEO's ghost-written memoir, in which the phrase public relations was auto-corrected to pubic relations multiple times. The reviews were brutal. Screenshots went viral. Someone even made a t-shirt with the worst typo. They recalled the book, delayed 3 others, and tried to pin it on a rogue freelancer. But the logs showed the automated edit trail. They reached out a month later to collaborate again. I offered my proofreading services at triple the rate. They paid in full. Story 36. I was the only forensic data analyst at a mid-size insurance firm. My job was to investigate suspicious claims, uncover fraud, and build internal reports that helped save the company millions. My new manager came from sales and didn't understand the work. She called my investigations paranoid and told me to stop slowing down settlements. So I gave 2 weeks' notice and quietly marked every flagged but unresolved case as pending escalation. Then I left. The replacement analyst didn't understand the code tags I had embedded into the database. He cleared them all. Within 2 months, over $900,000 in fraudulent claims were paid out. The audit team traced it all back and discovered the internal policy had been reversed without a proper review process. The manager was terminated. The fraud department was disbanded and restructured. Now I consult for 3 firms that do listen when I say something looks off. Story 37. I worked at a luxury car dealership as a financing specialist. I had a talent for getting approvals from tricky lenders, especially for high-risk clients who came in with money but poor credit. My manager constantly made off-the-books side deals, flipping vehicles through shell buyers and laundering commissions. I refused to participate. He warned me, "Don't make yourself the problem," so I resigned. And then I filed a 6-page anonymous complaint with the car manufacturer's corporate fraud division, complete with VINs, customer data, and screenshots of internal chats. 2 weeks later, a surprise audit shut down our entire floor. Corporate investigators arrived with clipboards and subpoenas. Sales staff were suspended. The dealership's license was frozen. I now work at a rival dealership that pays better and plays cleaner. The last time I saw my old manager, he was driving a Kia. Story 38. I was a technical director for a national theater company. I designed stage automation systems, coordinated lighting rigs, and scheduled rehearsals down to the second. The executive producer once said, I wielded too much control over the crew and tried to replace me with someone more artistic. So I resigned right before Tech Week for our biggest show of the season, a 3-month production with a rotating stage, flying rig, and synchronized projection mapping. I left behind a 200-page manual, all correct, all useless, because none of the control software was labeled. On opening night, the rotating stage spun backward. The backdrop glitched into an upside-down kaleidoscope, and the flying actor came down too early, mid-monologue. Audience, confused, donors, embarrassed, reviews, brutal. By intermission, the crew had stopped the show. The producer was let go within 72 hours. The next season, they begged me to consult. I said no encore. Story 39. I was a compliance trainer at a pharmaceutical company. I taught mandatory ethics sessions, documented audit trails, and ensured reps followed FDA rules when marketing drugs to doctors. When I caught 2 senior reps offering unauthorized perks to physicians, I reported it. My boss said, "If you ruin their numbers, you ruin ours." I resigned. Then I requested my own exit interview with HR and used it to submit all my documentation formally with names, dates, and digital timestamps. I also CC'd our legal department. An internal investigation launched within the week. 4 reps were fired. My boss was reassigned to a strategic role. The compliance department was completely overhauled. I now teach regulatory law at a university. Some rules should be enforced, even if it takes walking away to prove it. Story 40. I worked in hospitality, managing guest experience at a luxury mountain resort. I curated every part of a guest's stay, from music playlists in the lobby to wine pairings in the suites. When new ownership took over, they cut staff and told me to automate everything. They replaced the concierge team with a chatbot, told me to upload my files to a cloud folder, and said my position would be phased out. So I handed in my resignation. But I left them something special. The music system I designed had a hidden override, a silent alarm that would, if triggered, loop the playlist I used for setup, which included a 10-minute bagpipe remix of My Heart Will Go On. The following week, a billionaire guest triggered it by using the wrong admin password. The song blasted through the spa, dining hall, and lobby for 45 minutes. Social media loved it. The guest? Not so much. Management was forced to shut down for system maintenance. Reviews tanked. The automation initiative was scrapped. I opened my own boutique lodge 6 months later. Fully staffed? Zero bagpipes? Story 41. I was a senior accountant at a startup that grew way too fast. I created the internal financial systems, tracked investor funds, and manually corrected mistakes made by the CEO's college buddy, who was also the CFO. That guy once accidentally double-paid a contractor $80,000. When I flagged serious issues, I was told I was being too negative. They gave my responsibilities to an intern and asked me to focus more on culture, so I quit. But not before archiving a year's worth of flagged transactions, balance sheet discrepancies, and payroll issues, and sent it anonymously to the company's lead investor. 1 month later, the investor pulled out, citing gross mismanagement. Auditors were sent in. The company went from 80 employees to 14 in 6 weeks. That CFO, now a strategic advisor for NFT startups. I now work for a boring, stable firm, the kind that actually reconciles bank statements. Story 42. I worked at a food processing plant as the HACCP coordinator, basically the person who ensures food safety protocols are followed to avoid contamination or recalls. The plant manager didn't care. When I refused to sign off on a shipment that didn't meet standards, he yelled, "Don't get in the way of production!" So I resigned and filed a whistleblower complaint with the FDA. While I waited for them to act, I left behind a single unlocked USB labeled shift logs. Inside were time-stamped violations, falsified records, and photos of raw meat left at unsafe temps. 2 weeks later, the plant was shut down for emergency inspection. Multiple departments were suspended. Products pulled off shelves. The manager was fired. Local news ran the story. I now work in food safety consulting, and every time I visit a plant, they listen the first time. Story 43. I was a researcher at a political think tank. My job was to gather data, vet sources, and prepare briefing materials for policymakers. One day, I found out our lead analyst was fabricating polling data to skew reports in favor of certain donors' agendas. When I brought it up, I was told to focus on deliverables, not drama. So I prepared a farewell deck for my exit presentation. It looked normal until the last slide. It showed how specific reports had been altered, with side-by-side screenshots and source links. Everyone in the meeting froze. I stood up, said, "I won't be part of this," and walked out. An intern leaked the slide online. It went viral in journalism circles. Within a month, 2 directors resigned. 3 major donors backed out. The think tank is now restructuring. I joined an independent policy group where the numbers don't lie, and neither do I. Story 44. I worked in IT for a private prep school where the board funneled money into aesthetics over security. My requests for basic cybersecurity upgrades were ignored, even after I found out some students had admin-level access. Then one day, a board member's kid reset the gradebook to boost his GPA and blamed me. I was suspended pending investigation, so I resigned. Then I posted a technical walkthrough of exactly how the breach occurred, without naming the student, but clearly showing the vulnerabilities. Alumni forums picked it up. Parents started asking questions. The local news interviewed me under anonymity. Enrollment applications dropped. A donor pulled $1 million grant. The board tried to cover it up, but the emails leaked. Now the school has a brand new IT director, and I work for a cybersecurity firm, helping other schools avoid the same mess. Story 45. I was the post-production manager for a documentary studio. I scheduled editing, sound mixing, color correction, every moving part. One executive producer thought I was replaceable and told me to train a new hire who had no editing experience but was cheaper. So I trained her, very literally. I explained each step, gave no shortcuts, and didn't fix her mistakes. She was confident and clueless. Then I resigned 2 days before a major Netflix delivery deadline. The replacement missed an entire act in the timeline, sent the wrong subtitle files, used a temp color grade. The submission was rejected, and the platform fined the studio for late delivery. Clients panicked. A deal with a streaming platform collapsed. One producer tried to edit it himself, using iMovie. The department lost credibility. I was asked to consult. I said, "You wanted cheaper." How's that working out? I freelance now. I pick my clients, and they pick me back. Story 46. I worked as an environmental scientist at a consulting firm that advised large corporations on how to meet sustainability targets. In reality, we were just giving them PR band-aids to continue polluting. When I refused to sign off on a certification for a major oil company, despite failed emissions benchmarks, my supervisor said, "Don't be so precious. No one reads the fine print." So I quit. But before I left, I sent a full report to the EPA under my name, including internal communications, showing that our firm had knowingly approved non-compliant projects. A month later, we were hit with a federal investigation. The oil company dumped us. 3 clients followed. The sustainability department was eliminated for budget reasons. I now work for a nonprofit watchdog group that investigates firms like the one I left. This time, I'm reading every line of the fine print. Story 47. I was the only instructional designer at a large online university. I built all the interactive modules, assessments, and auto-graded exams. My code, my logic, my flow. When a new dean came in, he said he was streamlining the department. He replaced me with his niece, who had a communications degree and a Canva license. So I resigned, but not before removing my custom back-end logic from every assessment. It didn't crash anything. It just stopped scoring accurately. By the 3rd week, students were receiving 3% on perfect exams and 98% on blank ones. Complaints flooded in. Accreditation was put on hold. The dean tried to blame it on a server update until IT pulled up version history. My code had been flawless until the day I left. I was asked to return. I sent them my contractor rate. They paid it, then fired the niece. Story 48. I was a senior florist and visual designer at a high-end events company. I led wedding builds, gala centerpieces, and hotel installations. Everyone knew my aesthetic. Then the owner's daughter graduated from design school. She wanted a chance to lead, so I was asked to support her vision while she took over as head designer. I agreed, and then gave her exactly what she asked for. I stepped back. No adjustments, no gentle corrections. She picked wilting peonies in July and combined them with eucalyptus, triggering allergic reactions in the bridal party. At a corporate event, she spelled the company's name wrong in the floral arch. The backlash was swift. Brides canceled, vendors pulled out, Yelp went wild. She had a meltdown on Instagram Live, blaming internal sabotage. I posted nothing, but 3 clients contacted me directly, and now I do boutique installations under my own brand. The company's still trying to recover. Last I heard, they've pivoted to balloon arches. Story 49. I worked in a warehouse managing inventory control for a massive e-commerce brand. My system tracked damaged returns, restocks, and reorders with surgical precision. Corporate wanted to cut costs and hired a third-party software vendor to optimize what I'd already built. I warned them it wouldn't sync with our scanners. They ignored me. So I resigned, but not before removing my custom fail-safe scripts that corrected duplicate entries and time-stamped returns. Within 10 days, the system collapsed. Thousands of items double-counted. Some were marked as shipped that never existed in stock. Customers received cancellation emails after receiving shipping confirmations. The returns department flooded. Amazon paused our marketplace listing. They fired the warehouse director and begged me to return. I offered to rebuild, but only under contract from home at 4 times my hourly wage. They agreed. Story 50. I worked for a mid-sized architecture firm as a renderer. I turned raw CAD blueprints into hyper-realistic 3D visualizations clients loved. They made big sales based on my work. Then the new creative director said, "Renderings are a bottleneck. We'll use AI going forward." He handed me a prompt sheet and told me to teach the interns. I taught them, just enough to hang themselves. I explained things mostly right, but skipped all the technical corrections. Shadow bleed, glass physics, lighting balance. Then I resigned and wished them luck. Within a month, 2 major clients pulled out after being shown glitchy, surreal visuals. One skyscraper proposal looked like it melted in the sun. The firm was humiliated at a major expo when an AI-rendered showcase glitched mid-presentation, showing floating trees inside the lobby. The director was let go. I now do private freelance renders for 4 of their ex-clients. And I fix the shadows every time. Story 51. I worked in aerospace as a procurement engineer, managing supply chains for high-precision parts, some with 6-month lead times. I kept a tight ship, building trusted vendor relationships and tracking every order down to the hour. Then a new VP arrived from a defense contractor and told me I was too slow and needed to embrace disruption. He replaced my system with a bulk ordering model he found online. When a titanium alloy shipment came in mislabeled, I refused to sign off. He said, "Get on board or get out." So I resigned, but not before removing my personal vendor performance matrix. That spreadsheet was the reason we had on-time deliveries for 3 years. Without it, they didn't know which suppliers delivered junk, which ones required deposits, and which shipped early to avoid customs delays. Within 6 weeks, they missed a delivery to a NASA contract. Penalty, $1.2 million. The VP was reassigned. The department collapsed into chaos. I now manage procurement for a rival firm, one that actually listens.